Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today. And I apologize for reading from paper. This will allow me to keep inside the time limits. Okay. So today, I'd like to begin with a quote from one of America's prominent industrial designers. I believe that it was, in a sense, a prophet of the changes we're beginning to see in the ethics of industrial design today. This is what Victor Papanek wrote on the ID profession in the late 1960s. There are professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a very few of them. Before, in the good old days, if a person liked killing people, he had to become a general, purchase a coal mine, or else study nuclear physics. Today, industrial design has put murder on a mass production basis. By designing criminally unsafe automobiles, by creating a whole new species of permanent garbage to clutter up the landscape, and by choosing materials and processes that pollute the air we breathe, designers have become a dangerous breed. And the skills needed in these activities are taught carefully to young people. So the good news is that design is gradually taking on the role of creating more meaningful, life-saving products. This is just the beginning. There's obviously still a long way to go, but as a designer, a researcher, and a teacher, I can see these changes happening in the commercial and academic realms, including in the minds of our students, who are the future of the design profession. Today, I'll try and briefly outline some highlights of one project, one case study of a product that can make a change, the earthquake protection table. As is many times the case, this project began as something completely different. Arthur Bruter, who was at the time a student, came with a revolutionary suggestion for a final project. He wanted to tackle the price limit on this famous initiative, the one laptop per child, or as it was initially named, the $100 PC. He wanted to create a $10 or $15 laptop. Whether or not he would have succeeded is a good question, but I believe he would have at least created an interesting project. But to me, it was clear that something was wrong. What I found inappropriate was not the technical challenge, but the questions behind the need for this project. I told Arthur that before embarking on his mission, he would have to live for a while in Africa or in South America and come back with some good answers to why an African child would need a computer, how would he make good use of it, and whether that would be the best way to spend $100 or even $10. This is, of course, a controversial question and a project which we do not have enough time to go into at the moment. But what is important for me to stress is that good design must come from true empathy, but only if that empathy is complemented by deep knowledge of the people you're designing with and for. So Arthur went away to give things a second thought and came back after a few days under the deep impression of the tragic scenes from the 2010 Haitian earthquake. Apart from the initial devastation, you can actually see a schoolroom up there on the top floor. It is quite obvious that even if there were survivors, reaching them would not only be difficult, but would pose great risk to rescue teams. So Arthur defined a dramatic research question. Why are all children in earthquake risk zones instructed to duck under their tables? Here you can see, you can actually see the standard instructions for school children, when school tables are insufficient to protect them. What if a solution could be created that not only protected school children, but helped create better solutions for rescue teams? Could these pretentious goals be achieved by a young BA student in an art and design academy in a few months' time? The next step was to define a hypothetical solution. Arthur came up with a combination of this theory, popularly known as the triangle of life and controversial, and the common practice of duck, cover, and hold. It was at that stage that I had an intuitive idea regarding the deflection and dispersion of energy through the structure, an idea we needed to verify empirically. Just to put things in context, a bachelor's degree project rarely involves extensive academic research. There aren't really the means or the time to conduct such research, but at the Bezalel Academy and throughout the work of the RDFD group, we strongly believe in creating and testing prototypes from day one. Not only as a means of validating our thoughts, but as means of freeing our minds to find innovative solutions. Arthur's enthusiasm managed to convince the search and rescue unit of the IDF to conduct an impromptu experiment. You can actually see one of the first experiments we did on the table. The results of these early experiments, though a long way from being perfect, were good enough to convince us that we have a working solutions on our hand. We then froze the R&D process, applied for a patent, and Arthur continued work on other, less technical aspects of the project's design. Following his graduation, Arthur asked me to continue working with him on the R&D of the table. I'd like to elaborate a bit about the relationship between engineering and design in this project. You may by now be asking yourselves why this project isn't the outcome of solid engineering rather than the playground of designers. When we began the professional R&D on the project, it seemed obvious that we need some rigorous engineering to create a sound product. Without going too deeply into this issue, I can say that after receiving engineering solutions from two separate and excellent engineers, we found ourselves with an 80-kilo table that costs many hundreds of dollars to manufacture. At that point in time, I felt obliged to lay down two strict constraints that were go, no-go criteria for the project. The first is that the weight of the table will be such that two children can move the table freely. This is vital to the normal functionality of the classroom. The second was that the cost of the table will be no more than twice a standard school table. Without those, I knew we would have a life-saving product that would never save lives. These turned out to be very difficult constraints, limitations that eventually were not solved by textbook engineering, but rather by intuitive design and many simple or even primitive experiments. What we realized that really made the difference was that we were not designing a strong table, but rather working as energy flow choreographers or managers, allowing the energy to move through the structure and deform it while keeping a predefined safety zone unharmed. After numerous tests done in the backyard of Meraz, the manufacturer of the table, and a rigorous set of experiments supervised by Professor Modena at the engineering department of Padua, Italy, we were excited and proud to say that we have a light and inexpensive school table that can truly save lives. Here are some of the experiments side by side. So on the left-hand side, you can see a normal school table. It's actually a normal Italian, standard Italian school table, but we've done this with other standard tables. And on the right-hand side, you can see the earthquake protection table with various weights. This is a compact mass. You'll see a staggered mass, an 800-kilo staggered mass, dispersed mass, and also a 1-ton weight coming down on the table. We were actually given the 300 kilos as the top limit for the weight that the table has to carry, but we tested it much higher, actually 3 times higher. Okay. To sum up the story, I'd say that we were extremely lucky on a few counts. The first is that our structural intuition led us very quickly to solutions that work. We now know that even slight changes to one of many parameters of the structure usually results in structural failure. We have begun working with sophisticated software to validate these potential changes as we're making advanced designs for home and office protective furniture. The second is that the concept of rescue tunnels created by multiple tables seems very promising, allowing rescue teams a much lower risk factor in their crucial work. The third is the huge success the table has encountered in the design world. It has received numerous awards and is part of the New York Museum of Modern Art permanent collection. I'd like to see this not as a boost to our designer ego, but rather as an indicator of the way the design world is changing in respect to the importance of design as a discipline involved in disaster risk reduction and more generally, life-saving devices. The calculations assessing the table's relevancy to schools in danger zones were made by juxtaposing earthquake risk zones along rift lines with data relating to school children in developing countries where construction quality can be poor. We came up with a very modest figure of 300 million school children at risk at any moment. The true numbers are probably much higher. Furthermore, we now know that many countries that have very high building standards with extremely quake-safe schools, such as, for example, Japan, are also interested in providing safe tables because debris, ceiling tiles, books, lighting fixtures, and other heavy objects still come down during an earthquake, even if the building remains intact. In the final part of this talk, I'd like to take a look at the future. One of the things we have noticed at RDFD, our Relevant Design for Disaster Research Group, is that many of the solutions to disaster risk reduction tackle the problems from either a technological, an environmental, or an infrastructure standpoint. We have seen that the close study and related design actions of the so-called human factor are rarely seen as a major component of the solution. We believe that design as a discipline can be influential in analyzing and creating solutions in what we see as the triangle at the heart of any disaster-related situation: people, technology, and environment. Together with my colleagues Turner, Vinitsky, and Lederman, we are in the midst of exciting times. The Hope Spot, a marker balloon, which Eran presented yesterday, in the event of a major disaster, is becoming an actual manifestation of optimism by design. Once people get acquainted with it in peaceful times, they will easily find it during a catastrophe when looking for food, water, shelter, and medical treatment. The project is well underway and will probably become a commercial product soon. The PEP capsule, a personal information kit, is a data capsule waiting to unfold from your cellular phone. It is revolutionary in a number of aspects. It will allow each and every one of us to choose the type and volume of warning information we want to receive before, during, and after a catastrophe. It will collect crucial data up to the moment when systems fail and will process it to its user's advantage even when communications are gone. And it will function as a personally tailored guide and information center in the first hours after a disaster strikes, when your need for that information is highest. And we're currently seeking funding for an exciting project we call the Fabric of Knowledge. In a nutshell, I would say that it will research and develop the idea of sending mobile micro-factories to disaster zones rather than sending finished products that may not be adequate or appropriate. We've seen these. What I find most exciting and promising about the Fabric of Knowledge is the idea that these manufacture-on-demand solutions will utilize local skill and expertise, thus winning a triple goal. The first, to enjoy the collective wisdom and experience of local people for their own help in disaster situations. Look, for example, at these two young boys solving a carrying problem with a piece of textile. Okay. And the third, to create a growing body of knowledge that people from different disaster-stricken places can share with each other and use to support faster and better recovery. As an end note, I'd like to share my thought. In my mind, designing with and for people is similar to selecting or creating a gift for someone you love very much. It requires empathy and deep knowledge of that person's tastes, needs, and fantasies. But in order to be a truly great gift, it also requires something extra, something that you offer that person that he or she have never dreamt of, something that they didn't know they needed. Thank you very much.